And good evening, and once again, welcome to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And it's Monday night, and I'm really tired, and I'm really hungry. So this is going to be a somewhat, well, maybe not quite less energetic, but a more abridged version, you might say, of New Comics, bitches! See? I thought about doing this tomorrow night, but I figured, fuck it, I'll just do it tonight. Uh, because, it's Monday night, and this is the promise I've made to you, my audience. So, with that in mind, let's talk some fucking comic books. There was some excellent stuff that came out this week. There was some really good stuff that came out this week, and there was some really awful stuff that came out this week. And there was some stuff that was just kind of in between. So let's just start out with the Zero issues, because that's, I think, first and foremost on everybody's minds this week are these Zero issues. So let's start with, well, we're going to do two at once here, and it's basically Animal Man and Swamp Thing number 0. Now, one of the things that I really admire about what Lemire and Snyder did with these issues was to just put their own little tweak on the origin, the more classical origin stories of these characters, and also, but it's not so far departed from what we've seen before that it doesn't that the original origins of these characters, it doesn't get lost in all the in all the retconning, whatever you'd want to call it, and also even the more kind of reworked and refined origins that they would later come to have, courtesy of Grant Morrison and Alan Moore, respectively. But the real focus here is not so much on the heroes themselves, but actually on the villain of the piece and of both of these comics, and that is Anton Arcane. And I think was kind of the smart way to go here, because Arcane is a terrifically horrifying villain. That is more that is much more delineated in Swamp Thing than it is in Animal Man. But we get to see basically his, that we see the rise of the rot. It's kind of first and foremost. We get to see kind of the, again, the origin of these heroes as they become heroes, and we also get to see, well, Anton Arcane basically being gleefully sadistic. There is the moment in Swamp Thing, those of you who have read it, you probably know which moment I'm talking about, and that, of course, is the moment in which basically, Arcane sends in this. He's at a, he's looking to basically cut off the bloodlines of anybody that would follow, the various avatars or champions of the red or the green, in this case. And he goes to a maternity ward, and he sends in this, like, brain being that has a hand growing out of it and has eyes, and it's just it's so terrifically creepy. It just drips with creepiness and like pure terror. And that's one of the, that was, to me, it was incredibly disturbing, but also a big highlight of the issue as well, because it just really illustrates, okay, this guy is pure evil. But the, even more interesting is that there has to be a balance that is maintained between these three elemental forces of the red, the green, and the rot. And how, basically, Animal Man's story is not that dissimilar from what we have, except for, of course, the Red basically stepping in and manipulating things to look like, yes, it's aliens, because this is the world that Buddy Baker lives in, and superheroes are now around, so these costumed heroes. So why not actually give him a kind of superhero-ish origin to have him become our new champion? And then by the same token, with Swamp Thing, it's not that it was just a a greedy bad guy that that blew up his lab. It's actually Arcane himself, taking the form of of Alec Holland's wife, Linda, and and how basically he set the lab to explode, but not with dynamite or anything like that, but just basically setting his various chemical tanks on fire. So I mean, that to me was it all worked, and it worked really, really, really well. And so I thought that both of these were easy 4.5 out of 5s. Honestly, Swamp Thing leans a little bit more towards 5 of the two, and it's not just personal bias. I just think that it's a better issue, but not by much. It was these were two really, really, really well done issues, and Steve Pugh. Again, continuing to do, increasingly better work on Animal Man, and unfortunately, not so much unfortunately, because it's not terrible or anything like that, but Kano is the artist on Swamp Thing, as opposed to either Yannick Paquette or Marco Rudy. So that to me was just kind of a bummer that neither of these guys were doing the art. So just. But again, just really terrific issues, and definitely, very much keeping in line with the direction that the book is heading in. Which brings me to my next title, which does not keep in line with anything that's come before it, and that is Earth 2, number 0, where we Terry Sloan, aka Mr. 8. He is one of he's the smartest man on Earth. And this is, of course, before the Trinity of heroes, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman fell. And where it really goes off the rails is basically what they're doing in Earth 2 and what James Robinson has done in this issue, unfortunately, is he's done a redux of Ozymandias. He's basically made, he's the smartest guy in the world, quote unquote, and he's basically he sees only the only way to save everybody on the planet is to kill a lot of people on the planet, and of course this brings about the ire of the Trinity, and where this issue should have really, if it was going to take its time with this type of thing, it should have focused more on the Trinity of Earth 2. Because I think it would be more interesting to see those origins, or at least more backstory. I mean, well, you can't really do more backstory of the current slate of characters, but it would have been more interesting and more in keeping with the momentum of the book, as opposed to basically just taking a one-shot issue and just plastering it out there. It just, the art wasn't good. The writing was really overblown. And it was not a good issue of comics at all, really. It was quite bad. So Earth 2, number 0 was at best a 1.5 out of 5, because just nothing about it interested me. Nothing about it was at all fresh or new. Just seemed way too familiar, and it was just. And way too, this character of Terry Sloan is just too, he's too rogue, he's too much of a trope. And that just really kind of got on my nerves more than anything. It made me actually angry. So that was, like I said, at best, a 1.5 out of 5. Certainly not the best, but the most interesting of the Zero issues that I read, and easily the one that I was looking the most forward to was that of Phantom Stranger, number 0. And this was a really interesting book in the fact that they basically... Phantom Stranger has never really had an origin story. There's been a lot of speculation about who he is and why he's, kind of doomed to walk the earth to kind of pay penance for whatever it is he's done. I remember in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run that it was kind of hinted at that he was perhaps a fallen angel. And then instead of being turned into, one of Lucifer's minions in hell, that he was just kind of cast out into almost a purgatory, if you will, of being doomed to forever walk the earth to pay penance for his many sins. But what Dan Didio does here, who's the writer of this issue, is that he makes it much more definitive, and that basically the Phantom Stranger, his original self, was Judas Iscariot, the great betrayer of all betrayers. Now, I'm a really big fan of the film Last Temptation of Christ. Mostly because it really, not just because it's a brilliant film, but it gives a really interesting slant on these, very, very important biblical characters. And there's this one point in which, and I'm kind of getting off topic here, but I don't, just follow along with me, in which Jesus basically tells Judas that Judas has to betray him to the Romans so that he can die on the cross and be resurrected and basically open the gates of heaven. This is definitely not the tack that they take here. This is definitely much more in line with biblical mythology, if you will, not to terribly offend people. I think the Bible's a really interesting book, but I don't think that it's fact. So, call me a heretic, call me what you will. But anyway, so basically, as we find out, basically the silver kind of necklace that he wears around his neck is that of are the 30 pieces of silver that he received for betraying Christ. And his essentially his costume is made from the kind of the cloth that Christ wore. At least if I read it correctly. That's kind of what I took away from it. And obviously there are things, there are more specific things, like the robe, and obviously him hanging from the tree and everything like that. It just that part of it felt really interesting. It felt really cool. I liked the fact that he had a more definitive origin, and then we get to see as he goes along throughout the years. Now, of course, this is almost 2,000 years that he's gone without really getting the chance to start atoning. And whether or not that was part of his punishment kind of remains to be seen, because you figure along the way he would have found someone that he could have helped. But again, this is the New 52, so there aren't many characters of that ilk that he probably could have helped along the way. So we start then where he starts to atone, and in a very odd way, is he starts to atone with Jim Corrigan. And me, I was just going, yes. I know that Mark, Ghost Critic, was feeling very much the same way as I was when you see Jim Corrigan on the pages of an issue of New 52, and you're like, oh, fuck yeah, the Spectre, finally. finally get to see somebody that I really love and that I'm really missing from the New 52. Now, and the way that the Spectre is born is different from what we've seen, particularly from the John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake origin story that they did, where he basically he's killed, he's double crossed, he's killed, and when he goes to heaven, he then he says, "I've seen damn little of God's justice on earth." So, God basically says, okay, well then you will be the Spectre, you will be the wrath of the unavenged dead. That's not the case here, because basically, he is betrayed. It's basically more of a setup, and it's something that the Phantom Stranger inadvertently leads him into. But this is actually part of his penance, because the creation of the Spectre, or at least giving the Spectre a human soul to be tethered with, becomes part of his penance. And so one of his silver coins off his necklace, if you will, drops off, and he must continue on until basically once all 30 coins have gone, then the implication is that he will be embraced in heaven once again. The real problems that I had with this issue, though, lie in the writing by Didio. Is that it's very kind of 60s golden, kind of Silver Age, almost kind of Stan Lee-esque, verbalizing, and the dialogue feels very unnatural. Feels very forced. It feels very, okay, I am now explaining what I am doing in the way that nobody ever does. So that to me it just rang really false, and I just wish that somebody with a writer with more gravitas had tackled such, I think, an important character in the, as far as the pantheon of DC characters are concerned. This really could have been, a lot of other writers could have tackled this probably a lot better, if they had approached it from the same path that Didio did. But ultimately, it was just, it felt too kind of the dulling of kind of the Silver Agey speak to me. So. This was, like I said, a lot of interesting ideas here, and I'm interested to see the way that it will progress forward. I hope that as it continues, maybe it will. They're going to be kind of one-shots that have kind of this, this thread of storytelling, this consistent arc that will be leading on. But of course, Phantom Stranger will be meeting other heroes and perhaps other villains along the way. So I'm interested to see what comes next, though. That I am interested for. So I give this a 3.5 out of 5. So that's really it for the DC issues this week. Moving on to the independents, which there were only a couple this week that I'm going to be reviewing. There were more that I read. For instance, Bloodshot and Archer and Armstrong from Valiant, both really good reads. Again, very much keeping on this, this new development of the Valiant universe. Bloodshot is just is cruising along at high speed. No signs of that letting up. And similarly with Archer and Armstrong #2, was just that we have more of a kind of definitive, beginning of a partnership here between Archer and Armstrong. So it's just, it's interesting. It's really fascinating to see where these characters are going in the midst of this reboot of these characters, and I'm really, really loving the way that Valiant's new books are turning out. And each issue had kind of a preview of what was coming next for some of the characters that were in these books. We're going to be getting apparently Ninjak very shortly in Exo Manowar, I think, which is coming out this week. So I mean, they're really, if anything, they're like, they're going, kind of, ahead of schedule on some of these books. So they're not that they're cranking them out; they don't seem rushed, but I think they're anxious to get more characters involved. It's like I said, just really interesting to see the way this is going. So those books were terrific, really, really, really good. But the ones that I do want to talk about, Thief of Thieves, number 8. Basically what we have here is we have an issue where Conrad, aka Redmond, his ex-wife Audrey, her new man, Donnie, he's a real douchebag, and he sets out to have a little bit of criminal fun at his expense, and this would be a lot more interesting, quite honestly. That particular idea of him stealing from Donnie would be a lot more interesting if Donnie were actually a more fleshed out, less one-dimensional character, because he's presented here. He's kind of chubby, and he's wearing this. He's balding, and he's the total opposite of the suave, sophisticated, handsome man that Conrad is. And whether or not that's Audrey's kind of way of getting back at him even more, to go for his total opposite, is interesting in and of itself. But to make him such a complete and utter asshole, is just I think it wasn't the right direction to go in. But Augustus is free now, and of course this is where the main current of this story is going, is that he is, since he's been locked up, he owes favors, and people are calling to cash them in. So of course this is not leading to any place good for Augustus. And we see flashbacks of Conrad and Audrey not too long after Augustus was born. He's still a young child, and he talks about how Conrad talks about how he's never going to let Augustus become get involved in this life, and so on and so forth. And we also see the relationship between Conrad and Celia. And how really it's interesting, her use of sexuality. She seems to really want something from Redmond, and I don't think it's just his talent of thievery. She wants something more. And I think this is her way, of being the person that she is, trying to communicate that. I thought the dynamic was actually really interesting, and very overtly sexual. There's no undertones here. It's very much an overtone. I mean, she's she's just taken a shower, and she's eating a banana in a very, very suggestive way. And basically, he tells her to get lost. The real issue with this issue that I have is that you can definitely tell that Nick Spencer is gone. A lot of the snap, a lot of the pizzazz has kind of because I wasn't a huge fan of the first issue, but that started to pretty quickly change as things got deeper and deeper into the plot, into the characters, so on and so forth. And then Spencer just really was nailing it. I mean, he was nailing the dialogue. It was fresh, and it had a lot of snap. It had a lot of pizzazz. And James Asmus, who is now taken over as the writer and the co-plotter with Robert Kirkman, he's just not that guy. He doesn't quite seem to have the flavor of this cast down yet, and it leads to this kind of very predictable finale. This kind of predictable cliffhanger for Augustus and his girlfriend. And that was kind of what I was hoping this book was trying to avoid, but apparently not. So, this was, Sean Martinborough's art is still fantastic. So, I mean, again, it's certainly not bad, but it's not nearly as good as it could have been, and not nearly as good as it has been recently, especially recently. So this was about a 3.5 out of 5 for me for Thief of Thieves number 8. I only have really one thing to say about the next comic, and that is Black Kiss 2 number 2. For those of you who have read this, first of all, if you haven't read the original Black Kiss, which I would have to honestly search for again on Amazon and see if it is something that is still available to get in trade form. But this is catering solely to the fans of that book. If you liked the original Black Kiss, you will probably also like Black Kiss 2. If you've never read it, you're going to be really lost, have not a fucking clue as what's going on, and you're basically going to see porn, Howard Chaykin style, which to me is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, because there's a lot of sex in this book, and there always was. I mean, even in the first Black Kiss, but it had more of a ongoing plot. It had a mystery to it and something supernatural to it. So, I mean, to me, this was more of a, again, we're finally getting to, Dagmar and, like, kind of her origin, as we've kind of already seen, who is a character, of course, in Black Kiss. And it's really just, there's a lot of fucking going on in this book. There's a lot of gender bending going on here. It's not quite as kind of S&M-y as Black Kiss was. This is definitely kind of more straight up sex. I shouldn't say straight up. I mean, it is really twisted shit, but it's not, quite as much leather and, straps and so on and so forth as Black Kiss was. So this is still, it's a very guilty pleasure, which is not to say that like just jerking off to it or anything like that, but that's really what it is. I mean, we were talking about this, a couple months ago when I brought up the idea of art versus pornography, and this, it's very artful pornography is really what it is. So this was, to me, is a 3 out of 5, because you can't help but enjoy some really twisted pornography, especially when it's set within the mind and the framework of Howard Chaykin. So I still enjoyed it. So now on to Marvel. And first we're going to talk about Ultimate Spider-Man number 14. So basically what we have here is, this is just a really good, solid read. It's basically Miles Morales meeting with Aunt May, Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, and Captain America. Basically, Captain America is saying, no, you can't do this anymore. And really, it's because of the guilt that he feels about not properly training Peter Parker. But the people that really come to bat here for Miles are, surprisingly enough, Aunt May and Gwen and MJ, because they really tell him that you do not have to be Peter Parker. You need to keep being Miles Morales, and don't constantly think of what Peter Parker will do, but think of what Miles Morales would do. And of course, this leads to him getting the web shooters. and Aunt May actually gives him Peter's mechanical web shooters. So of course this was literally the passing the torch moment, which is huge. The only real issue that I have, again, with this issue is that it doesn't really follow through on what's been going on in the rest of Divided We Fall. This seems to be taking place in a very separate place from the events of that story. So that's the only real problem that I have with it, and it's a pretty significant problem because, I mean, the whole idea of the Divided We Fall arc is that all of these books will somehow tie in together. So whether or not this will be, that will again pick back up with the next issue, will be an interesting place to see where it goes to. But more than anything, it's a very, Bendis tells a really solid story here. Gets in a very definitive moment in Miles Morales' life. And of course, David Marquez doing again another brilliant job on art. I don't even miss Sarah Pichelli doing this book anymore. Even though Sarah Pichelli, if you watched or didn't watch, but just heard about the Harveys, and of course you saw Mark Waid get best writer. You saw Daredevil get best new series. Technically, it is a new series because it's a new #1 and everything like that. But you also, Sarah Pichelli was also most promising new talent. And she's been plying her trade over in Spider-Man, which is also an incredibly well done book by Bendis. But she was, of course, doing the art on this before. And then Samney came in for a little while, and now we have David Marquez, and his art is just fantastic. So again, and it opens up with a really nice homage to that issue of Uncanny X-Men, the Claremont Byrne run, with the whole Professor X is a jerk, moment, but instead it's Gwen Stacy saying it and saying Captain America is a jerk. So it was a nice little kind of, it was a nice little homage to that, and it felt good. And this brings me to the other webhead title that came out this week, and that is Amazing Spider-Man number 693. Now, I have read, of course, 692 by now. I want to take all of Marcus Martin's variant covers and plaster them all over my walls because they're just so unbelievably gorgeous. But of course, we had the introduction of Alpha, and the definition of his character being that he is the first Alpha level power in the world. And this is, of course, this was an accident of Peter Parker's, and so it is now Peter Parker's responsibility to deal with Alpha. Well, that hasn't been working out so well, and what I saw here in this issue, and I really, really don't want to say this, but is what I feel is kind of the beginning of the end for Dan Slott on Spider-Man. I think honestly, I think he's getting tired. Because this book is just terrible. There wasn't... I appreciate what he's trying to do. He's trying to draw these parallels between Peter, as a young man, and Alpha. That basically Alpha is doing all the things that Peter would have wanted to do and would have kept doing if Uncle Ben hadn't died. But he's just being basically a selfish little prick. And as I said I said in a comment on, I believe it was Ghost Critics vlog in regards to this issue, is that Alpha to me is rapidly becoming Jason Todd. He's becoming the sidekick that you want to die. Because he's just, he's not even a sidekick. He's just a punk. And, you know, yes, he has these alpha level powers and so on and so forth, and we have the Jackal involved, and of course, you know, so Jackal automatically equals cloning. I have considered the Jackal for a long time to be one of the least of Spider-Man's kind of, you know, rogues gallery. Because he's a twisted fuck, and his whole bag is just cloning. I'm gonna clone everybody. Clone Gwen Stacy. I'm gonna clone Peter Parker and make up fucked up versions of these people so that they'll either love me or hate me or obey me or whatever. I mean, you know, obviously what he did with Spider Island was really clever. But now it's just getting into the same old shtick. And it's just like, oh, God. Really? You know, he's trying to clone Alpha. Oh, surprise! The Alpha clones don't work. And, you know, it's just like, give it a rest already. I mean, we just did this. We just did this with this character. Let's bring in another of his rogues gallery. Give me just about anybody but, you know, his kind of, you know, not his arch nemesis, but I mean, just, I don't know. Because, I mean, you know, the Jackal is, in a way, you know, kind of, he is what he is supposed to be, to me, what Ra's al Ghul is to Batman. He's supposed to be his most dangerous villain, but because, you know, but not, you know, everybody's favorite villain. Obviously, everybody's favorite villain is the Green Goblin. But, you know, because this could have gone to a place where we're starting to deal with, and I know that this is coming up, but like, okay, have the Hobgoblin coming in. You know, we saw just, you know, in 2 issues previously, we had, you know, the whatever, you know, the Devil Spider, you know, have some things going on with Kingpin, but that all got, you know, pushed to the back, and now we're just kind of dealing with the silliness, the absurdity of this new character, Alpha. I was not a huge fan of 692, and I'm really not a fan of this issue at all. The only saving grace that it has, really, is that, you know, is Humberto Ramos's art. It's the only thing that I could say that's good about it. Everything else, the jokes seem tired. The characterization seems tired. Just everything seems off and seems bad about this issue. And it's just really indicative to me that Dan Slott is starting to run out of steam on Spidey, which is something that I hoped would never happen, but he's had so many great Spider-Man tales that he's told within the last couple of years. Maybe it's time to give it to somebody. I don't know who. I don't know who would take the reins from here, because I don't want it to go back to being, you know, to being like the Straczynski super serious. The only person that I could think to kind of take back the reins on this is Mark Waid. But he's far too busy making Daredevil awesome, and currently also making Rocketeer Cargo of Doom really awesome. And of course, he has his, you know, his other imprints, you know, his Thrill Bent and everything like that. So that's that. So this was at best a 2 out of 5. It's very, 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 very disappointing. So now we have my picks of the week. And it was honestly really hard to choose between what book I thought was best. So I'm going to start with kind of the second runner-up. And the second runner-up is Punisher number 15. You know, basically we have, you know, Christian Poulsen the last remaining member of the exchange, the last name on Rachel's list, essentially, of people that she needs to punish, he's become a maniac. He's stricken with grief because of the death of the woman, that he was in love with, the second to last member of the exchange that Rachel killed in the previous issue. And so he decides that, okay, what's going to be a really good idea is to go down, to basically start running through the halls with an automatic weapon and killing as many people as I possibly can, and then setting up the Punisher to take the fall, because he is, in fact, setting up both, Frank and Rachel to take the fall for this, because Rachel is still very much an unknown variable for the NYPD. They know that the Punisher won't kill civilians. That's just fact. He will not do it. He will not step over that line. But Rachel, maybe. But nobody really knows for sure about Rachel yet, because that is one of the things that that Ruck has been so good at, and Frank himself has really been good at, is keeping her existence more or less, secret, for the most part. But basically, the NYPD, they surround the office building, and of course, Ozzy and Bolt show up to kind of lead the charge into the building to get to the Punisher. And we have those of you who don't want this spoiled, I'm going to give you my standard kind of spoiler alert. I'm going to hold up my hand and I'm going to say, okay, I'm about to spoil things here. But once the NYPD shoots in its tear gas and begins to breach, which is usually a good idea against the Punisher, because the Punisher will not harm he won't harm another protector. That's just the way it goes. That's his creed. He only punishes the guilty. But he usually is also smart enough to have an escape plan. I'm sure he does. But ultimately here, Rachel makes a horrific mistake. And here's where I'm going to spoil this. So again, mute your screen for a while. So here it comes. And this is where Rachel kills Walter Bolt. And that is very likely the last mistake that she will ever make. This was incredibly shocking to see, because it is, we've seen Frank building up Rachel, that she could almost, not quite take his place, but in the way that he could assist her, help her take her vengeance out on the people that ruined her life, that stole her life away from her. I mean, she's dead. I mean, that's basically something that has been already kind of gone over in this arc, is that Rachel Cole Alves she's dead. She doesn't exist anymore. She's just a soldier with an enemy that she needs to kill, and that's it. That's all that she is now. And Frank's mission has been to put her in to put her kind of in the driver's seat, or at least in the passenger seat, I should say, of being of taking this vengeance. And when she makes this very critical and horrific mistake, like I said, this is probably going to prove to be her last mistake. Because whether or not she can live with it herself, or whether or not Frank will allow her to live with this, doing what she's done, is a question ultimately that's going to be coming for the next issue. I don't give this 5 out of 5 just because it was shocking, but just in the way that Rucka has, we have come, the way that we see that he has orchestrated events so that they do come to this penultimate climax here, because I think that issue 16 is going to be the end of Rucka's run on this book, and more than likely the last issue that we see Rachel in. I don't know if I'm right about that, and I'm sure that there's people out there waiting to correct me. But anyway, it was very shocking. It was an incredibly tense read. You know, my heart was kind of like pounding all the way through. And of course, Marco Checchetto is back for, I think, these last 2 issues of his run with Rucka on the Punisher. And it's just, you know, his art, so sublime, so masterful. It's just amazing, the work that he does. And, you know, kind of the gravity that he ends up bringing to each issue. And, you know, it just shows that, you know, how well an artist can convey the ideas of a writer through drawing. You know, I mean, it's just amazing. And it's, you know, a fantastic read. It's an absolute 5 out of 5. Second runner-up is another major shocker for me. And it's a book that not a lot of you read, at least not that I've seen, and that is Jennifer Blood number 16. What we have here is that, as we found in the last issue, is that Andy has found Jennifer's war journal, found her diary, as where she talks about everything that she's done. And he is going to, well, he's thinking about calling the cops on her. And she comes in to, you know, ultimately find out that he has been reading, he's read her journal. And he is beside himself with anger, with grief, you know, that she's, you know, that he killed, you know, that she killed, you know, her, you know, his, you know, the woman that he actually was in love with, and, you know, just keeps making these excuses to kill more people, and that basically she's kind of out of her mind, or that she will just keep seeking new justifications based on the mistakes that she herself is making. And she, of course, she denies it all at first, and basically makes it out to be like a fantasy type of journal where she fantasizes about doing these things. But of course, you know, eventually her true colors emerge when he actually goes to hit her, and she ducks and breaks his arm. You know, just because of her training. That's where it kicks in. So, but again, this is a spoiler, but I don't think I'm really spoiling it for anybody who is reading this book, because, and for those of you who aren't, you're kind of tuning out anyway, but he has had enough. He is about to finally dial 911. He's going to call the police. And just as he's about to hit the last one, Jennifer stabs him through the throat and kills him. Kills her own husband because she will not let anybody take her children away. And that's really at the crux of what's going on in this book right now. Now, this is now, and over the last couple issues, it has been very clear to me that this is not going to be an ongoing series. This is something that's going to be finite, and is probably coming to an end sooner rather than later. Because what we have here is we have Jennifer totally unhinged. Her behavior is absolutely shocking, but totally in character. And just totally awesome. Al Ewing just really brings it home here. There's a new, I think, limited series kind of coming out. I think this week, which is Jennifer Blood, First Blood, and I think that's going to be kind of a prequel, kind of more origin storytelling. And I can't remember who it's written by, but it's not Garth and it's not Al. So to me, unless, again, this is one of those people that's kind of handpicked by Garth, I don't think I'll be picking it up. I might read through it, but I don't think I'll be buying it. But this was just, I mean, I was just sitting there and, just catching flies in my mouth because, I mean, my jaw had just hit the fucking ground. I mean, I was so blown away by what happened here. Even more so than what had happened in Punisher. So, I mean, this was just an absolutely riveting read from start to finish. Incredibly dense, excellently portrayed. Kuber Bali, or whatever exactly his name is, the artist, doing another terrific job on art. And just, I mean, Al Ewing just wrote the living shit out of this issue, and it is glorious. And an absolute, again, 5 out of 5. But my ultimate pick of the week has to be, and this is going to start to get to be a tough week, because usually the pick of the week for this week of publishing tends to be either Animal Man or Swamp Thing. It's going to have some pretty serious fucking competition from here on out, because my pick of the week is Hawkeye #2. Agent 42Q, I know, was not particularly that happy with the first issue of this. I was deliriously, insanely in love with the first issue of Fraction and Aja's run on this new book, and I am again in that kind of insane delirium of just utter happiness with this book. Is basically what we have here is that they bring in Kate Bishop, of course, who, as a young Avenger, she was Hawkeye, and while he was doing his whole dressing up like a ninja thing, as it's talked about in this issue. The chemistry between these two characters is phenomenal, and it is not just in a physical way, because obviously he is many years her elder, and this doesn't want to get creepy, at least for him. Although I'm sensing that there's a bit of something there that Kate has for Clint. And basically what this is Kate and Clint, they make their way into, basically, the circus of crime has come back to town, and Ringmaster. And he is using his hypnotic powers on some of the biggest crooks in New York City, so that he can steal their money, steal their jewels, basically to steal from some of the most powerful criminals in New York City. And Kate and Clint have come there to steal from the thieves who are stealing from the thieves. And of course, to stop them, that's a big part of it, but also to make off with the loot. And this is going to put them squarely in the crosshairs of these incredibly powerful people once Clint has put a stop to them. I like, first of all, the fact that these are all very self-contained stories, that this is not necessarily going to be part of a bigger arc. That each, the first 2 issues anyway, seem to be very self-contained in the stories that they tell. I'm sure that, there will be an arc that will grow out of this, but, and particularly out of this issue, because there's a lot going on here. I mean, other than, Kate and Clint teaming up to take down Ringmaster and the Circus of Crime. But you know, there is, like I said, that chemistry that I was talking about before, and just, you know, the fact that he's, you know, kind of, you know, he's putting himself out there as, you know, I've stolen your money, I've stolen your jewels. Admittedly, I was stealing from somebody who's already stealing from you, but I have your stuff now. I was able to get your shit. So, you know, come at me. You know, it's basically like a bring it on type of thing. You know, it's like, just, you know, I'm here, you know where I am, come get me. And, you know, so basically we have the transformation of Hawkeye, not from Avenger to something else, but he is Avenger, and he is also now street vigilante. And, you know, the issue does, as it points out, get a little grim at certain points, because, you know, Kate, for instance, she puts some arrows through some assailants' eyes, not killing them, but essentially blinding them for life. And you know, another villain that they do have to deal with is another of the swordsman's proteges, and Clint puts some serious hurt on him, of course. Again, you know, there's no lethal force being used here, at least not by Clint and Kate, but it really toes the line. And there's a lot of self-awareness in this book. That would normally be something I would probably have a little bit more of a problem with if it wasn't written so goddamn well. I mean, you know, Fraction does just amazing, strange, and hilarious things with his dialogue, and it's an incredibly fun read. David Aja his work is, you know, it is like, it makes you want to cry. That's just how good his art is. And, you know, Matt Hollingsworth does not get nearly enough credit for the job that he does in this industry, but he is a fantastic colorist, and his, you know, his color palette and his color schemes work incredibly well within the confines of this book. You know, because there's a lot of purples, there's a lot of, you know, kind of lighter purples, darker purples, and, you know, it's Hawkeye's color scheme, so why not use it? But he uses it even to an even greater effect than what we would normally see. This was, again, just a giddy, magically fun, incredibly entertaining, and really, really, really smartly done book. And I cannot say more good things about it, so I'm just going to stop saying good things about it and just say this was my pick of the week, an absolute, total, 100% 5 out of 5. This was a fantastic book. So for those of you who are not reading Hawkeye, I absolutely recommend and suggest you start going out there and picking up Fraction and Aja's Hawkeye, because it is a great book. So that's it for this week's New Comics, bitches! I'm really hungry and I'm really tired, so I'm going to eat and then probably go to sleep, and then that'll be that. And so, of course, if it's your first time here, subscribe, and, you know, thumb it up, thumb it down, comment, criticize, complain. Work with me, people. Give me feedback. I want to know what you think about these books. I want to know what you're not reading, why you're not reading it. I also want to know what you think, again, that I should be reading. Obviously, you know, just got a stack of books here from Miggs. Again, thank you, brother. I'm reading. I finished Mystery Men in one night. It was incredible. It was fantastic, wonderful. I'm gonna start reading. Doom War very shortly. Not tonight because I'm too tired, but tomorrow, more than likely. So So that's it again for this episode. So again, if you're new here, subscribe, so on and so forth. Comment down there. And we'll see you next time. So until then, this is James Donnelly from the Shadow Gallery saying good night to you all and reminding you all to stay in the shadows.